An hour later, they had covered over half the distance. The landscape had gradually changed. They were on a long, broken plain, apparently unaffected by the storm. Crusted dunes were everywhere around them. In the distance, foothill-sized drifts could be made out. Ali tried patriotism. "The people need you," he said. Felix sighed. "They have a guardian now. They have Tasp. You know about that. Well, you have bothered to keep up then." "No. But who else could it have been?" "You." "Well, it wasn't. You would be better." "What's wrong with Tasp? Don't the people like him?" "Of course they do. He's a good guardian." "Well then, but he isn't you." Ali stopped suddenly, looked at him carefully. "They wanted you." Felix matched his gaze. "I wanted Angel." Another hour. The team sat or lay sprawled around them in the sand. They were making very good time. Ali voiced concern about arriving early. "If we have to wait 2 hours there, won't it be just as bad?" laughed Felix. "I have scared the Masao." "Don't be impertinent." Felix laughed again. "Yes, great one." And he went on to explain that it was location, not timing, that counted. He was explaining about the 3-hour safety margin surrounding retrieval when it hit him. He stopped and stared at his friend, seeing him, really seeing him for the first time. And, more importantly, really believing he was here. He sat forward and threw his arms around his chest and held him close. They were silent for several seconds. Then they broke away. Ali peered closely into his faceplate. "You're back," he said. Felix smiled. "Yes. This is really you again." Felix laughed. "It always was." "Some of you," Ali corrected. He nodded. "Some of me still, Ali. It's been very bad." "Whatever. I think it's incredible. In 4 hours, after 2 years of being whoever it was you were." Felix shrugged. "I was already on my way. He was dying." "He?" "The engine." "And that is what?" "Exactly. A what, as opposed to a who." Ali shook his head. "I don't get it." "Good. It's just something that, well, it kept me alive." "If that's what you call living, the life you had is..." "Ali, once and for all, I'm not going back. Never." The Masao sighed loudly. He lay back in the sand. "All right." He tapped the toe of a boot against Felix's armor. "I hope your next suit is more fun." Felix shook his head violently. "No. No more armor for me. I don't..." He stared at something in the distance, not seeing it, and wondered how he had possibly done it at all. He shook the thoughts away. "I don't know what I'd do if I had to fight again. No more armor for me." I wasn't talking about fighting especially. But it's still armor, whether you admit it or not. It's still something you hide in." He sat up. "Felix, you came here to hide in there. But everything you were hiding from was in there with you. That's the trouble with armor. It won't protect you from what you are." "And what is that?" "What you'll do." "When?" "When it counts." Suki approached and bowed. "Speak," said the Masao, standing up. "Lord, the officer in charge reports the scout." He looked at Felix, embarrassed. "That is, one of the warriors. He was sent ahead over the next hill. He reported retrieval proximity." "Hot damn!" said Allie happily, slapping his golden palms. "We're there." "Damn near," Felix agreed. "Lord, then I can tell them we can begin at once?" "Oh, yes. Yes, Suki, by all means, at once. Let's get the hell out of here." "Yes, Lord," Suki agreed happily, bowing and backing away. Felix stood up too. Soon the procession was again on the move. They marched in silence over the hill. Soon, each had the retrieval beacon flickering below his hollows. Only a few hundred yards to go. Allie matched steps with him, throwing an arm over his shoulders. "So tell me, what are you gonna do? How are you going to live?" Felix grinned. "The Masao will be pleased to provide the necessary luxuries." Allie's arm jerked away as if stung. "And what if he does not?" he demanded in mock outrage. Felix's grin broadened. "Then I'll break his legs." Sniffed the Masao. Said Felix the scout. Felix laughed. "Of course, there is always blackmail." "Blackmail? You dare to suggest the record of the Great One is impure?" "Personally, I would not," replied Felix humbly. "But Labella might." "Labella? Now there's someone your mother would really love. How could you do this to your oldest and dearest friend? You bastard. I was only 16. That's the best part, seeing as how she was 60-something? She was not. She was 30-ish. Felix threw back his head and cackled. "Are you kidding? Her wrinkles had wrinkles. You could draw a line between her nipples and get her navel." "That's unfair. Unlikely is what it was." "You're very cruel. Labella loved me." Felix shrugged. "You were a big tipper." "Now, that is unfair." "I always thought so, considering the quality of her act." "Felix, don't you start on her dancing again. You just never understood. She was a very artistic grandmother." Allie started to speak, but the laughter burst through at last. They howled a while. Then Allie became quiet. "You know, I think about Labella now and again." "I should think so. You were going to give up your title for her." Allie sighed elaborately. "I did love her. I had such passion for her eyes." "That's horniness. For her thigh. You have no romance in you, you know that?" Felix laughed. "My karma." "Your karma's jammed," said Allie sourly. Felix laughed again. "Now, to the money." "Oh, very well. Even though it's against my principles, but only in installments. I don't want you running off on me again." Felix touched an armored hand gently to the other's arm. "I won't. Never again." Allie looked at him. His eyes shone. "I know," he said shortly. Then, "I brought you a ship. It's small, but—" "You knew?" cried Felix, amazed and delighted. The Masao nodded. "Let's say I feared." Felix stopped, put an arm out to stop Allie. Then he placed his faceplate against his. "Thank you, Allie, for—" The tears ran warmly down his smile. "For coming to get me." Allie blinked, embarrassed. He shrugged elaborately. "I had some free time, and—" Felix laughed. And it began. So quickly, it began. The wind first. It swept over them without warning, pounding against them with rhythmic, pulsing gusts. The sand sizzled against their armor. The transit cone symbol appeared on his and everyone else's hollows. The CO's voice barked on command frequency. "Everyone in the perimeter, prepare for retrieval." The Imperial Guard materialized out of a gust, collapsing around their master. "Damn this wind!" shouted Allie. "Come on!" he shouted, and started to run. Felix and the guard followed. The CO again. "Transit cone sighted. Everyone in on me! On the double!" Felix and Allie arrived at the back of a pack of warriors. Seeing them, the warriors parted to let them by. The transit cone, 10 meters away, shimmered clearly before them. The CO again, in front of them as a gust receded. "Sir, if you care to go first." "I would indeed," replied Allie, stepping forward and motioning Felix to do the same. "What's that?" asked a voice. Felix was not paying attention. "Looks like a mountain," said another voice. Felix was just following Allie. "Where?" asked a third voice. Felix automatically turned around. "There!" said the first voice, and Felix looked where the man was pointing and froze. The warrior was pointing to a hive. It was the biggest Felix had ever seen. Kilometers away, it must have been thousands of meters high. But he did not think of that then. He thought of hive, knuckle, transit beam, the hammer! The hammer! Allie! The first blast was awesome. It threw him off his feet. He crashed into the sand on his side. He could see nothing for the sand. Screams, piercing, whimpering, unbelieving filled his ears. He couldn't find Allie, and he yelled for him, but there were too many people yelling already and too many forms on his hollows. He stood up and rushed forward, and the second hammer struck, flattening him face down into the sand. And there were more screams, and with them horrible sounds coming from all over, of wrenching plasteel and bone and pressure escaping. "Allie!" he screamed, but he could hardly hear his own voice, much less any reply. Another blast erupted, and another, and another. All around him, homing in, he knew, homing in on the transit beacon, and the people, and Allie, and more screams, and something flew past him, crumpling as it went, and he knew what it must be, but he didn't care. He didn't. It wasn't gold. And there he was, suddenly, on the ground before him, the cone flickering dully off the gold. He rushed forward and grabbed and tried to lift as another blast struck, and more screams. "No!" Allie was screaming. "Let go!" And he saw it then. Saw the hole. Saw the sand being blown out from between Allie's golden clenched fingers as they tried to hold it shut. Seconds. Only seconds left. "Allie, I'll carry you! Don't worry!" He reached down and tried to get a hold to lift the huge suit, but it was an awkward position, and he was afraid of dislodging Allie's grip on the hole. The hole. My God. A hole. Seconds! Seconds! "I've got you!" he said, and the next blast struck. Damned close. And in that instant, before he careened away, he saw, through the glare of the blast, through the blinding sand, through the reflection of it all on Allie's faceplate, the fear. Allie was afraid. And then he was crashing and tumbling through the air, and the sand and the bodies jounced obscenely past him and against him, and the world was filled with the sounds of their terrors and the deaths. Seconds, seconds, seconds. Somehow he was back and leaning over him again. There was nothing else, nothing but this to do, and this one to live, to make it, to live. Allie! But the glove on the rip was weakened in opening, the head lolling inside the helmet. "No!" he screamed. "No!" And he reached down and clamped his glove over his friends and gripped with all his might. With his other hand, he reached around and down and lifted him, weightless, up against him as a mother does her child, pressed against her chest and protecting. Allie's faceplate full on his own. Allie's eyes darted slowly and rested on his, and he opened his mouth. An ice formed immediately on his gums, but he still managed to say, "Felix," before he died. 3 steps into the cone, unhurt by the carnage, untouched by it. Transit. The patterned lights, the drop bay, and people everywhere rushing with waving arms and strident voices. Someone tried to take the golden suit from his arms, and for a moment, the urge to kill was strong and clear and pure. But no. He relented, slid the shining gold to the floor, and walked away. It may as well have been an empty suit. Allie was gone. People pushed against him, shoving him back from the growing center of alarm and accusations. He moved when they pushed, stood still where they left him. He seemed to be there a long time, facing without seeing the cascade of movement and emotion. Then, someone took him by the arm and led him firmly away. Someone big, in big blue armor. Fine. He could walk. He could do that. Through the corridors they went. They passed the door to the armor locker. They took a lift. They transferred to another. They began to walk faster, urged by the big blue glove on his arm. They were in a part of the ship he had never seen. He recognized it from the briefings and the rest, but he couldn't seem to place it exactly. And he was tired of walking, tired of the suit, tired of the urgency he could not match in their strides. They stopped. The blue arm let go. He stood in semi-darkness, watching as a black and white jumpsuit, security, rushed forward, yelling about unauthorized and wearing armor where they should not, and the blue arm whipped out, tendon taut, and the black and white was on the floor. What the hell? He blinked and looked and Kent? Kent? Kent was coming toward him again, the determined iron look on his face. He had seen that look before, once before, and... "No!" he blurted, and tried to push out to protect himself. But then the great blue fist rocketed up at his eyes, slamming against the faceplate, and as he fell, he relaxed and let go. At last, at least, it was over.